Hello, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank the committee for providing me this award. My name is Nazmul Islam, and I am a professor of digital transformation at the Software Engineering Department at LUT University. So today, I will be mainly talking about blockchain for regulatory compliant IT design. So far, I think you have heard that blockchain is mostly used for cryptocurrencies and maybe also for supply chain. But in this lecture, I will try to give an alternative view that blockchain can be actually used for regulatory compliant IT design, especially a GDPR compliant information systems design. So without any further delay, so basically the agenda of today's lecture is this. So first, I will briefly explain about blockchain. Of course, you all know what is it, but I will just provide a brief introduction to that. And then I will also explain a bit about GDPR, or General Data Protection and Regulation. And then I will speak about blockchain for GDPR, basically how blockchain can be used to ensure GDPR, what kind of alignments are there, what kind of consistencies are there between blockchain and GDPR. And then I will just summarize the key takeaways from this short lecture. So first, blockchain. So what is it? So blockchain, as you know, that it is a distributed, synchronized, and immutable digital ledger for recording information. And the information can only be appended and no deletion or modification is possible. And it is not maintained by a single authority, but the consensus algorithm is used to maintain it and to also to update the database or the ledger. And blockchain helps to design responsible information technology because it provides security. It uses cryptography and other techniques to ensure security. It is transparent because you can check whatever happened in the ledger. Then it is accountable, and all these things promote trust. So that's very brief about blockchain. Then how about General Data Protection Regulation, or GDPR? So basically GDPR stands for General Data Protection Regulation, and it is the toughest privacy and security law in the world. And this is not told by me, but actually the official website of GDPR says that it is the toughest privacy and security law in the world. It imposes obligations onto organizations anywhere, as long as the target is to collect personal data from the EU. So personal data, it's all about personal data. And the GDPR is technology agnostic. So basically it provides some kind of general principles or general guidelines, and the technology design needs to follow that those principles. So it is not really a bias toward a particular technology, but rather than it provides some general guidelines. The regulation came in effect in 2018, May 25th. So basically just 5 years ago. So there have been a lot of initial hiccups at the beginning, but now things are kind of settled down. But still, you would see that many GDPR violations and penalties are there, and they are coming again and again to public organizations, or also for private organizations. So it's like the penalties are quite heavy. For example, 20 million or 4% of the global revenue, whichever is higher, plus compensation to the data subject. or the citizens. For example, Amazon got a penalty like 746 millions, Google got 50 millions, and so on in the past. So in GDPR, there are some concepts that we need to understand. The first one is the personal data. So what is personal data? Personal data is any information that relates to an individual who can be directly or indirectly identified. For example, social security numbers, or even the cookies could be personal data if those could be used to identify an individual. Then the concept of data processing. Data processing means that any action performed on the data, whether it is manual or automated, is called data processing. And data subject. Data subject means the citizens, the person whose data is processed. And then data controller, the person who decides why and how personal data will be processed in an organization. And finally, data processor is a third party that processes personal data on behalf of the data controller. So the data controller is the person, if something happens, some problem happens, then citizens or people can ask that person. So these are, basically some of the concepts, some of the key concepts in GDPR. There are some GDPR principles. So in order to understand, how blockchain can be used, we should also understand these GDPR principles. So the first principle is about lawfulness, fairness, and transparency. And it says that processing must be lawful, fair, and transparent to the data subject. So transparency is very important, and it has to be lawful. Then the next one is called purpose limitation. So this basically says that you must process data for the legitimate purposes specified explicitly to the data subject when you collected the data. So when you have collected the data, you need to mention that this is the purpose. For this is the purpose we are going to use this data, the data. And you should always use the data for that particular purpose, for nothing else. And then the data minimization. You should collect and process only as much data as absolutely necessary for the purposes specified. So you should not really collect all data, all types of data. You need to think about the purpose, and then you need to collect as little information as possible to be able to provide that service. Then accuracy. You must keep personal data accurate and up to date. So this basically means that if a citizen's name or address or anything is updated, he or she has the possibility to update the data. Then storage limitation. You may only store personally identifying data as long as necessary for the specified purpose. So that's the storage limitation. And integrity and confidentiality. Processing must be done in such a way as to ensure appropriate security, integrity, and confidentiality, using different types of encryption techniques and so on. And accountability, I just mentioned in the previous slide, the data controller is responsible for being able to demonstrate GDPR compliance with all these principles. And of course, if something happens, the data controller is accountable for that. So these are basically, some of the GDPR principles. Okay. Then next slide, we have there are some GDPR rights. There are many GDPR rights, but maybe some of them are very interesting when we talk about blockchain. For example, the right called the right to rectification. This basically means that the citizens, if they want, they can update their information. Then right to eraser. This basically means that citizens have the right to delete their information. And then there are some other rights like the right to restrict processing, which is also very interesting in the context of blockchain, the right to data portability, right to object, rights in relation to automated decision making and profiling, and so on. So these are all about GDPR rights. But now let's take a look how blockchain can help to achieve compliance with GDPR. So we have just discussed that there are several GDPR principles like lawfulness, fairness, transparency, purpose limitations. We have just discussed. And if you think about these principles, you could see that they are actually very much aligned with blockchain. And blockchain basically does exactly the same thing. If you think about blockchain and smart contracts, they can be used, for example, you can ensure blockchain and smart contracts to make sure that data processing is done for legitimate purpose. Blockchain can be used for the process tracking. The citizens can see or you can provide visibility to the citizens how the data has been used. This complete process tracking is possible through the use of blockchain and smart contracts. Then smart contracts and blockchain can be used, for example, consent management. And then when citizens don't want to or want to restrict something, they have the more control. So they can provide, the technology can provide more controls to the citizens. So the point here is that we can use blockchain to ensure these GDPR principles of lawfulness, fairness, transparency, and purpose limitation. But then it's not that that all all properties of GDPR or all principles of GDPR are actually aligned with blockchain. There are actually some inconsistencies. For example, blockchain is an append-only database that continuously grows when the new data is added. But if you remember, we just discussed that GDPR recommends modification and deletion of data. For example, when the citizens want to update their information, some modification to the data is needed. And then when citizens want to delete their data, they need to be able to delete the data. So there is a inconsistency. There is inconsistency between blockchain and GDPR. And we looked at what kind of solution are out there, and we found that there is a solution called off-chain solution, where basically most of the personal data you could keep in off-chain, and then you could link the off-chain data with blockchain. And in the blockchain, you have only the hashed data, so nobody can understand it. So basically, if some data has to be removed from the blockchain, you just remove the link or remove the data from off-chain and cut the link between off-chain and the blockchain. So this is the solution. So basically, what we see, the major takeaways from this is that, of course, when you design some kind of information systems, you need to collect personal data as little as possible. So that's the classic one. But then what we can also see that possibly blockchain provides a layer of trust and transparency for the citizens. Then also we think that a GDPR-centric block system design approach needs to be adopted. And this is also echoed by this European Parliamentary Research Services, which basically says that blockchain architects need to be aware of different challenges from the outset and make sure that they design their respective use cases in a manner that allows compliance with the European data protection law. So basically, in my research, what I am trying to promote is that we should build systems following GDPR/lawful by design. So what I'm saying that from the very first word go, we should try to develop the system that is lawful by design. So the system architecture, when we build the system architecture, that should be lawful at the first place. So rather than kind of following a reactive approach, here what I'm suggesting to have the proactive approach. So we should follow GDPR or lawful by design approach. And as you could see that, this kind of problems are very much, multidisciplinary in nature. So basically, participation of multiple stakeholders, such as researchers, developers, policymakers, legal experts, and end users are needed when you try to develop a GDPR by design or lawful by design system. So that's all from me. And if you are interested in collaboration, or if you have any question or anything, please feel free to contact me to this email address. And thank you very much once again for listening.